Hi, I'm Carlotta Berry, and I'm a professor of electrical and computer engineering in the Lawrence J. Giacoletto Endowed Chair of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology. I'm also an Open Source Hardware Trailblazer Fellow for 2022. And today I want to talk about creativity and innovation and how that can be a guidebook for academics to engage in open source hardware development for their service, research, and teaching responsibilities. So first I want to share a meme, and this is typically what I do with my students, when I'm teaching them about engineering design and creativity, is I share something that I know hopefully they can relate to. So today's is XKCD, is engineers versus everyone else. So a person walks up and pulls a switch, and when they pull the switch, they get zapped by a lightning bolt. So they're now perplexed and they look at the switch. A normal person would go, I guess I shouldn't do that again. An engineer or a scientist may go, I wonder if that happens every time you pull it, every other time you pull it. Was it a freak accident? And so what I tell my students is this is what creativity and innovation are all about. It's figuring out how things work, how to put things together and take things apart in order to design something to make it better, to improve a process or a product. And so that's what we want to talk about today is creativity and innovation, and how being an academic who engages in open source hardware is a great way to help with this. So brainstorming or ideation is really just the process of generating, developing, and recording ideas, producing a large number of ideas in a short period of time by doing things like writing short phrases or pictures or drawings or mimes or memes or whatever, and each member generates multiple ideas. So the first thing that I want to propose is that by engaging in open source hardware, this is a great way for an academic to do ideation with their larger academic or scientific community. Because by making your products open source, other people will engage with your intellectual property and offer recommendations for improving it, making it better. And now you can borrow from some of this open source technology with respect to software and hardware in order to improve it and make it better. So it's really a big way of doing brainstorming and ideation by engaging in open source hardware. And because we know that creativity is really just the process of making something out of nothing and bringing something into existence, and it involves imagination and skill to combine and adapt seemingly disparate parts into a functional and useful whole, you will be amazed to discover that there are things out there in the world that you may not have known already exist when you get in the open source hardware community that you can now borrow or use. For example, I am doing mobile robotics, and I'm designing this platform using all these open source skills and techniques from Tinkercad and from 3D printing world. So now, because I've made my work open source, I'm able to tap into that brain trust to see ways to make my ideas better, and also to borrow from these disparate parts to make a better functional whole for these ideas that I have already created in my mind. So innovation is creativity implemented in context, such as a new method, device, or process. And in my case, my innovation is all about mobile robotics, engineering education, using robotics for outreach, for service, as well as using robotics for research, such as heterogeneous teaming, human-robot innovation, human-robot interaction, human-robot interfaces, etc. So innovation is a way for me to take these creative techniques and implement them in the context of open source hardware, and then make better devices, methods, and products and processes in order to do that. So in order for me to be creative, there are these phases, and what you will see over this next year that I will share on my blog is that some of the things I have done to prepare for this work is become more knowledgeable, such as how to create a guidebook such as this, how to edit videos, how to 3D print, how to make a 3D print model. What's the proper way to design this robot so that it can be the most flexible and adaptable for various skill sets and for various uses. Concentration, focus on being attentive and creative. Incubation, such as sleeping on it. Inspiration, such as getting light bulbs about ways that we can use open source hardware to improve the academic journey and professional development. And then how do you verify and improve? And so this is another way that you could use crowdsourcing, like I talked about in the engineering design process video blog, to help improve and expedite this process when you do it and then you engage in it with open source hardware. So research has shown that when you generate and evaluate ideas, an individual will generate the most and best concepts, although sometimes they may be stimulated by ideas from others, but groups are better at generating the selection criteria or looking at the design requirements and criteria that will then evaluate these concepts and enhance and make them better. So this feeds in directly into open source hardware, where now by me sharing my ideas and sharing my technology and sharing these things I have created, although I may have come up with a very good concept, now having it evaluated by my larger community of peers, they help me generate selection criteria and can offer recommendations for how to improve it or make it better. And so another way of thinking about this is by having the larger community engaged in your work, then you can look at different ways that people approach problem solving, such as vertical versus lateral thinking, where engineers can typically be either more convergent or vertical thinkers and take a problem and proceed logically to a solution. I know immediately the best way to design a robot to follow a wall or to detect an object using color or camera or whatever. And so I have a linear process that starts at the higher level and drills down and refines the elements of that design. This is called narrowing down to a single solution. I know what I'm looking for when I first start. I make my design criteria and requirements to fit that. But there's another way of approaching a problem called lateral or divergent thinking, where you use and identify multiple creative solutions, and it's concerned with right or wrong solutions to the problem. It's like throwing everything in the kitchen sink and then pulling different things out and putting them together to see what sticks together the best. And you develop as many solutions as possible. I am looking for something. I don't know what it is, but I will know when I find it. This is the open source hardware approach, and there's no one that's better than the other. But when you marry the two of them together, you can yield the best solutions to your problems. And so these are some of the benefits in using open source hardware. Some of the ways to improve your creative abilities are to keep track of all of your ideas, be open and receptive to the ideas of others. That sounds like open source hardware community. Obviously keep your sense of humor, because as you throw everything in the kitchen sink, there's going to be some silly ideas to come out. Learn to know and understand yourself. Pose new questions to yourself every day. Keep abreast of your field. Yet another way to do that is engaging in the open source hardware community. Learn about things outside of your specialty. Need I say it again? Avoid a rigid set of patterns or way of doing things. Adopt a risk-taking attitude. Make time to be creative. Sometimes you got to go back and think like a beginner to come up with those innovative solutions. Have courage and self-confidence and engage in creative hobbies. So once again, thank you so much for coming. And I hope you will come back for our next video blog, which is all about problem solving and troubleshooting, which are really important skill sets for engineers to have in order to engage in all types and matters of product design and process solutions, but in particular, open source hardware as well. Have a robotastic day.